right, well, I'm going to give you the official welcome before I forget how to pronounce the last name, which I think I already have. But here we go. Let's try it.
All
All right.
right.
So I'd like to welcome to BeerNet Radio, Jeff Agase, founder of
Bingo.
BrightBev, a new consultancy that helps promising startups perfect their strategy and route to market. Jeff is a beer industry vet who went to Harvard Law School and served for 15 years at Molson Coors, where he was corporate attorney overseeing deals and ultimately led the company's 10th and Blake craft division until leaving last fall. He also led the National Distributor Network Development Team at Molson Coors for half a decade. So welcome, Jeff. Thank you for being on. We're super excited to have you.
Thank you. Longtime listener, first time caller. So appreciate
Awesome.
it being here.
Yeah, we love those. And, you said you had a long list of dreams that you'd like to come true. So,
Yeah, I actually did a little advanced work, if I may. If you were
yeah.
in the market at all for intro songs, I do like that twangy guitar that you have at the beginning during the band, the witty, the witty banter. But just in case you could get the licensing in place, we've got "Dreams" by Fleetwood Mac.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Like Harry
Very
might be a
good.
big Stevie Nicks person. Not sure
I
about that. He
love
can't defend
that.
himself because he's not here. You got Dreamweaver, which
Oh,
memorable scene from Wayne's World. Sweet Dreams Are Made of This.
Mhm.
Eurythmics. That would be more like a high ABV, high sugar F&B situation, and so on and so forth. But
Love
I've
it.
got plenty more that we can talk about on the outro later.
I
Right.
love
Well,
those.
as you know, they're all outros here, Jeff. Outros only. That's our motto. But I love it. Love it all. I'll run it up the food chain. And yes, Harry wished he could be here, but year-end planning stuff popped up, and there's always the perpetual gout that strikes too. So
All right. We,
He
we,
just,
we, we got to catch up at the Circle Bar at Caesars over NBWA, which is where all your networking dreams come true. So
yeah.
it was a good chat to see you there, Jen. And Jordan, I think you were just arriving. You had a bag and were looking like a bit harried as you were just getting to
Yes,
Vegas.
I was covering the Boston beer meeting.
Oh,
So
okay.
I had to miss the happy hour, but I made it just in time for a couple beers. But sorry
Yeah,
to have missed you.
that's all right. It's the circuit right now.
Yeah, I
It's
know.
finally winding down.
I feel like it was busier this year than it's been in years. I don't know if it was just me, but I just feel like it was relentless for months.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like content wise and sort of the level of stakes that are now out there in terms of either supplier meetings or NBWA or the BI, the topics that we're now discussing at these things feel much higher stakes these days. And I'm sure some of that has to do with what's been a rough year overall. But what was once kind of a celebratory convention vibe is now one that has a little bit more angst and has people asking for solutions to problems at this point.
Yeah. No.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, let's get into it because I think we're going to touch on some of that and in your past and your future. So we're here to talk about Bright Bev, but I want to dig into your time at Molson Coors a little bit. I saw on your website you oversaw 100 plus distributor transactions and new brand rollouts at the giant beer company. And I'm just curious, are there any that really stand out in your mind, right, as sort of the pinnacle or just more memorable than others?
Yeah, during my time running a group called Distributor Network Development at Molson Coors, which is essentially national distributor relations. So you're in charge of distributor M&A. That's the cloak and dagger stuff that, I don't was told not to talk to the trade press about,
Yeah.
hence
Yeah.
us not having a dialogue for that 5-year period. As well as new brand rollouts, distributor performance, ran the National Distributor Council as well, and so developed really keen sense for how distributors make money, how they think about suppliers, how they think about trends and new brands, what it means to be a supplier that might kind of outpunch your weight based on size, and how to be especially easy to work with as a supplier. As far as the deals and the transactions go, there were so many of various sizes. The very first one that we did was 40,000 cases, and then all the way up to the acquisitions by raise of DBI in Northern California, Nashville, and a host of others over that time. But the thing is, with distributor transactions is there can only be one buyer,
Yeah.
and with exclusive territories, these are usually hotly contested deals, and there's often more than one party that wishes they were the buyer and didn't get a chance to be. So, trying to be an honest broker and be fair in that job, and to be consistent in your decision making is a big challenge, but one that if I think you're successful at, then you can develop longstanding relationships, even if some of the wholesalers aren't pleased with the outcomes on the deals.
Yeah. Yeah. No. And I mean, that's great experience for what you guys do now at BrightBev. So tell me a little bit more about what you all do at BrightBev, because as I understand it, you guys are basically matching these clients that you have of your choice, right? These sort of bespokely chosen startups to the right distributor network. Do I have that right? What else is involved? And kind of what makes you guys different from some of the other similar programs and consultancies and that sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, this all kind of started after I left Molson Coors when they sold most of the breweries in the Tenth and Blake business that I was looking after, and started to think about a couple of things. One was just like you would if you're trying to solve for a consumer problem and you were starting up a CPG brand, a beverage brand, or otherwise. What's something that I've seen that bothers me or bothers others that could go for solving? That was the one piece of it, and then the second was these relationships that I'd worked hard to develop with distributors around the country, as great as they were when I left, they could go stale if you don't keep them sort of active and live. And so while I had grand aspirations of getting like exceptionally good at something, while I had time to figure out what was next, and so I was, throwing around getting really good at backgammon or learning how to play contract bridge or, doing some fencing or something like that. It turned out as a
Mahjong.
really bad backgammon. It turns out as a really bad backgammon player.
Oh
So
man.
this idea kept in my mind, and I couldn't get it out of my head, which is unfortunately most new beverage brands fail, right?
Mhm.
They fail at a precipitously high rate, like a higher rate than the famously high failure rate of bars and restaurants. I mean,
Right.
if you were spinning a roulette wheel as a beverage brand, you would only win if it landed on zero or double zero. It's that stark. It's like 5%. Um, and yet the barriers to entry to create a new beverage brand have never been lower.
Mhm.
So there's a lot more fails now because there's a lot more tries. And the reasons for that are access to contract manufacturing is a lot more plentiful now. You can get product into consumers' hands through DTC channels, in a lot of cases, even with an alcohol beverage product, due to some of the three-tier exceptions and carve-outs. And then just the average American, and especially the average American founder today, has so much more marketing acumen than they did 10 or
Mhm.
20 years ago. And it's probably because of what we've been bombarded by, right? And so there's some awesome brands that have been created with a nominal amount of money in a Canva account in a dream, truly.
Right.
And yet even those brands fail. And so thought, well, early stage beverage brands can get help from a lot of areas: formulation, co-man, finance, legal, branding, PR, positioning, even fractional field sales support. But where are these brands lacking in outside help? And there just was not a lot of help specifically focused on this kind of opaque and inscrutable thing of that's
Mhm.
called DSD and called route to market. And I think the reason for that is that most beverage founders don't leap out of bed in the morning and go, all right, time to set up my distributor network. But it's a fascinating space, as you know, and as y'all cover, on a daily basis. But a lot of these brands that otherwise should be succeeding either jumped to the first distributor that called them and showed interest and flattered them, or they tried to ride out DTC for longer than they should have, or they assumed that they needed to do very little to engage with the wholesaler. So thought, why don't we focus specifically on route to market and DSD? Because there's a lot of help in all these other places. But rather than starting on the supply side and hiring up a ton of clients and then sort of coming with the trench coat and the gold watches and saying, which one of these do you want to buy, Mr. or Miss Distributor? Why not use some of those distributor relationships that I wanted to keep active and live and start on the demand side instead? And so what we do that we think sets ourselves apart a bit, myself and my partner, Doug Valicki, who I think you know as well,
Yep.
is we take distributors through what we call brand explorations. And that's typically 6 to 8 trends that we're seeing based on a number of kind of verticals that we look at. So beverage trends, food trends, pop culture, what's going on
Mm.
in the economy, kind of some inside baseball industry stuff. And then, yeah, syndicated data, but we're never going to outpunch a big supplier on providing depth of data and insights. But sometimes we touch on things that large suppliers might not yet be ready to share with wholesalers. They might be behind on, they might be too risky. And so, free of charge, we don't charge distributors anything for this. We sit down and say, here's some things that we're seeing. here's some brands in the wild that sort of embody this. When we first started, none of those brands were clients. Now some of them are clients, and we always disclose that. Would you be interested? No obligation. Just tell us your opinion about this trend. And there's been a lot of receptivity to it from distributors because they need a filter, really,
Yeah.
really badly need a filter. I mean, you know how they're inundated. The biggest distributors will get inbound interest wise, 100 plus brands come in a month, and they'll take 10 plus calls at least a month. And so they need a filter on the brand, the trend, the quality of the founder. But
Yep.
then founders on the other side need a translator. They need to know how to speak distributor. They need to know how to break through with wholesalers. And so we've found that there's a lot of receptivity on both sides there. And by looking through the lens of would a beer distributor be interested in this brand? And would a beer distributor be really good at selling this brand? You greatly narrow your focus around which clients you're interested in taking on. And then it hopefully creates a little bit of a virtuous cycle where you come back to the wholesaler and say, remember that thing that we talked about 6 months ago? It's becoming a thing. And I have some examples that, I'm sure we'll get to in due course. But in that regard, I think that founders have seen a lot more uptake from wholesalers, including major wholesaler groups, because that seed's already been planted. We haven't just
Mhm.
gauged demand, we've helped to sort of shape demand as well.
Interesting. And just, I'll hand it over to Jordan, but to follow up, those silos that you guys put together, that filter, right? How did you create that, right? Including things like pop culture. And is that what this 7F brand assessment system is, or is that different?
So we start off with what we call lighthouse trends, and that was that beverage, food, and there's some things sitting underneath each of those. And
Mhm.
the idea was that everybody in our business sort of knows in their heart of hearts that they should be reading, listening to, and watching news sources from 40 to 50 different places. And that's,
Mhm.
of course, Beer Business Daily and its sister and brother publications,
Sure.
required reading. But really also things like what are the Substacks that are out there that are really influential, not just in beverage, but in popular culture? Which ones have a generational orientation? And we'll flash this slide to distributors and say, here's 50 logos of things that you kind of know in your heart of hearts you're supposed to be keeping up on, but everybody's busy. And
Mhm.
so we take from there in a method that's kind of equal part art and science and say, let's draw some connections between the things that are going on. So, for example, if US tourism to these foreign countries, is
Mhm.
increasing precipitously and US cultural affinity for those countries is increasing, then how can we link that back to some of the flavor trends that we're seeing in some of the segments where we're seeing momentum? And that's where we came up with one of our trends of saying that, internationally inspired RTD brands, whether wine-based or spirit-based, from countries that have growing affinity among Americans that maybe didn't used to. So what used to be the influence of Mexico on consumer tastes in beverage is now the influence of Japan and Korea and Brazil and Portugal and India. I know recently you talked to the folks at Nectar and prior to that, Grog. I mean, those were examples of brands that we called out to distributors saying this really embodies that trend.
I know we'll get to the distribution side, but first I want to talk about like the supplier side because you kind of have a front row seat to the entrepreneurial spirit in this industry. And, traditional beer, I think it's safe to say, is in need of new ideas. And so the people you see looking to supply fresh ideas, what area of beer are they kind of circling as one ripe for disruption and change?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a few. First of all, I'll say this. I think beer wholesalers want nothing more than a new beer brand to work really well. So,
Yeah.
notwithstanding distributors getting into everything that isn't beer over the last several years and becoming a total beverage approach, I really truly believe that they desperately want to see a new brand that improves category beer and brand beer succeed.
Right.
And so underneath that, it's just a matter of new energy that can come in the form of flavored beer that sort of blurs the lines and has somebody take a sip and say, well, I don't like beer, but I like this. I mean, that's the number one consumer that beer really needs to claim and reclaim. But there's also content driven brands out there. There's brands that are giving a glimpse into the founder's journey, but then also some that are interestingly showing some things that we otherwise would have thought as was like strictly business to business inside baseball stuff. I mean, one of the brands that's not in beer, but that does a really nice job, I think, in social media is Noka, who goes out to retail and celebrates sales reps at distributors hitting incentives based on display. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that we talk about in the business, but it turns out it's fascinating to fans. You have brands like Friday beers that are keyed in on a sort of place and a time. And then, one of the trends that Jen, you and Bianca and I were talking about in Las Vegas was this idea of mid-strength beer, which was really one of the first trend spaces that we were sharing with wholesalers at the beginning of this year. And in the course of the last 6 to 9 months, the idea of beer that's in the 2.5-ish% ABV range, but with no compromise on flavor. So maybe you do actually let the calories float up a little bit more than your traditional sort of Miller 64, Bud Select 55. But you deliver a full flavor experience with the hypothesis that most folks don't want to go straight down to zero necessarily. But they also want the ritual and the experience of continuing to drink beer, but they also want something that has and delivers fuller flavor. And so trying to key on the things that beer's always been distinctly good at, like moderation, like velocity for us in the business. I mean, the issue with moderation for us right now is not one necessarily of abstention altogether. I think it's one of consumption. And so we're trading what had been a handful of light beers in a drinking session for one light beer and one non-out beer, or one IPA and one non-out beer, one non-alc aperitif or spirit or something like that, or just a water, for goodness sake. And so anything that can get people reaching again and getting into their mind that, beer is the thing that you can enjoy over a period of time. That could be flavored beer. That could be something that speaks to them content wise, or, we're really bullish on this mid-strength space. So, there's brands like Dad Strength that was recently appeared on Shark Tank. Small Beer is one of our clients that we work with. We're just finding a lot of uptake from distributors in the space, where maybe in the past it was seen as a nice little business, but maybe not the next thing that might lead to renewing consumption levels in beer.
Yeah. Yeah, mid-strength and light beer, it's kind of funny because I feel like on this side, it used to be a lot of craft trying to put out superior beers in contrast to light beer. And now it seems like there's a lot of people just saying, hey, let's just put a new spin on light beer or easy drinking beer. And, I guess why that contrast? And do you still see grand ambitions in craft nowadays? Are there still people that uh, think that that's the segment where they can break through in beer in a big way?
I mean, I think what you're seeing now from these kind of lager and nostalgia in some ways oriented craft beer brands at lower ABV is a combination of fatigue based on ABV and calories. I'll still enjoy a super hoppy beer and probably more of a single IPA than a double IPA these days. Um, but people wanting to move to something lighter and more sessionable, but not make, in their mind, any compromises as far as craftsmanship and quality and level of flavor. And so, I think what craft probably needs to do is grab all of the great things that vaulted craft into the American consciousness, but shed some of the baggage that's now unfortunately associated with craft. And so if you think about at its peak, craft was known for high flavor. I mean, in many ways, it was the original flavor, craft beer. People drank a craft beer, I mean, even in the days of a brown ale, and said, I didn't know beer could be this flavorful. So high flavor, high quality. It eventually got to a point of high consistency, but I would say more than anything else, high talk factor. When craft was really starting to accelerate, that's what people talked about in alcohol beverage. I mean, people engaged in discovery and experiences around craft beer, and I think beer has, in general, has seeded that quite a bit. And so now getting back to the idea of returning to, I'm going to give you all the things that you love about craft beer. You can even come and visit our brewery and our tap room, but I'm going to do it in a way that orients to where my drinker is today, which is probably in a lower ABV, lower calorie space overall.
Yeah, it seems like RTDs have kind of taken those three things you were just talking about over. And, I feel like RTDs have been around for a while now, but there's still so much more. There's still so much more you can do in that space with flavors, bases, ABV strength. You were talking about the international affinity. So how much more run room do you see in this space, and will it be kind of the bulk of innovation moving forward still, you think?
I think there is still an enormous runway, especially if we don't get too caught up in trying to come up with the next highest quality tequila based RTD, right? So, yeah, when we walk into a wholesaler, when we counsel our clients, we don't say, "I have a great idea for you, tequila based RTD," and the distributor's
Yeah.
like, "Oh shit, let me take you back here and show you like." But I think we sometimes also, in a way, overestimate how picky consumers actually are about things like alcohol bases and how we categorize something in Nielsen or Circana. And so I think increasingly taking brands and saying, here's something that has a great backstory historically that delivers a unique flavor in a vibrant package with a memorable name like Long Drink. And oh, by the way, did you know that this has a gin base to it? And somebody's like, gin? I don't even like gin, but I like this. And so RTD in that way is becoming sort of the delivery mechanism for all of, to your point, Jordan, all these different flavors. And there's continuing interest, I think, in the distributor tier and particularly the beer distributor tier um, around bringing these types of brands on. There's probably an opportunity in mid-strength RTDs as well in saying, I want something that is giving me that same experience, but I want it in the 2 to 2.5% range. I want to feel something, but I don't even need to go up to 4.5 or 5% in what you see in the sodas, in the seltzers. But I think the opportunity to bring in flavors and provenance, both in flavor, so fruits and herbs and spices and things like that, but also just the flavor from spirits that Americans are increasingly discovering. So when I talked about Brazil, like a cachaça-based drink, for example, right? You talked about soju before.
Mhm.
There's all sorts of spirit bases that are probably in a lot of ways adventurous and new, but you can present them to people in a familiar format, which is typically that 12-ounce sleek can.
Yeah. Well, and probably at an affordable price point too, because you don't have to buy a whole
Yeah,
bottle.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I mean, the reason why I think distributors are still open to it is that as long as you walk in and solve a problem for the distributor, you're always going to get an audience. But so many founders out there, understandably so, think I've solved the problem for the consumer and my work is done. And that might be the case in other consumer goods, especially those where you can reach people through DTC channels. But as we know in our business, there are gatekeeping functions and for good reason. And you have to go in and not just solve a problem for the person who's ultimately going to buy your product. You have to solve a problem for the distributor that has a portfolio that could be, in some cases, the envy of the marketplace. And you have to find some way to differentiate your brand so that they can see through and say, yeah, there'll always be some cannibalization across my portfolio. And yeah, this is under that RTD umbrella. And yeah, new RTD is the last thing in the world that I need. This is different. And once they think through all that, oftentimes it lands, a lot better. And I think that that's the key, really, is thinking about solving a problem for the distributor, not just for your consumer. Because a lot of stuff solves problems for consumers, right? But then a
Yeah.
distributor has five of them in their warehouse and three of them aren't selling, unfortunately.
So you do think there is still white space because there are so many SKUs and it feels like, in this industry, there's so much follow the leader. Like there's 10 teas and there'll probably be 10 Asian flavored RTDs next year, right? Like,
Yeah,
so, but you firmly believe there still is white space for both the consumer and the distributor.
I do. Although, as the white space becomes increasingly narrow, which it
Mhm.
is, execution is going to become a much bigger part of this. And so,
Mhm.
similar to seeing a craft shelf that got very, very crowded, what happened? The brands that worked hard on developing a brand world and reliability and something that went beyond what IPA do you have, sort
Yeah.
of like the ages old, what Pinot do you have question that sort of bedeviled wine, unfortunately,
Mhm.
is you don't want somebody to feel like they're settling when they're picking up an RTD now and saying, "Oh, this is just some vodka and seltzer together." So I do think that there's white space, but I'm also seeing just an extraordinarily high number of brands jump into this space very late, and not from big breweries and big suppliers, from entrepreneurs who, for whatever reason, don't realize just how hard of a ground game this business is. I mean,
Mhm.
this business will punish you, as we
Yeah.
all know. It's fun, and it's the reason
Right.
that we're all in it, and it's the reason that we don't leave it.
Yeah.
But the brands that really succeed, at least in our experience, Sports metaphors are a little overdone in our industry, obviously, but if you'll humor me,
Yeah.
especially since Jen's wearing the U t-shirt right now.
And you're an Agassi, right? Yes.
Yeah. Ah, you're 1 for 2. That's okay. 500 will get you in the Hall of Fame, certainly. Most brands that are successful, they reach the end zone running 4 yards at a time, not with like a 50-yard bomb of a pass play. And so we're always counseling people, don't get swayed and don't get discouraged by the posts on LinkedIn of the massive displays and all that kind of stuff, or the new 30 states that you're in because you signed a multi-state distributor.
Yeah.
That's a lot of the advice that we give
Interesting.
is listen to your podcast, listen to founder stories. More often than not, what they're talking about is having built a business narrow and deep,
Hmm.
and then figuring out what that playbook is and then applying that playbook to another market, because a distributor likes nothing more than to take on your brand and for you to say, I know exactly where this plays. I know exactly where it works. I know exactly what the pricing should be like. I know how to activate it. And we have a playbook for you, versus what a lot of brands do, which is go into wholesalers and say, well, you're the expert. What do you think? What are
Yeah.
some good accounts? Let's run an incentive. And then they always end up regretting the money that they spend on that incentive.
Yeah. 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 Interesting. Very interesting. You've also mentioned, I think you've mentioned a few times, narrative sort of driven brands, and you guys have a client. Girl Beer is very narrative driven, right? Um, do you think that, I mean, some people would just call that good old fashioned marketing, but it's very specific in that it is, almost more than what's inside the can or the bottle online. It's the voice, especially leveraged online. And then, of course, at retail, again, kind of talking about Girl Beer and what Ray has said. But do you think that narrative 2.0 marketing is sort of the next wave of brands that will transcend flavor and base and that sort of thing? Is that sort of an underappreciated space right now?
I don't think it'll ever be a replacement for quality and consistency
Sure.
of the product itself. And, Ray, for example, with Girl Beer is always very quick to point out, using only top tier co-manufacturers to
Mhm.
produce the product and all of that. But I do think that consumers and even distributors now increasingly interact with brands that speak to them with a certain vibe and with a certain feeling. And we may even see the shelf change over time to seeing a bunch of different bases of alcohol all mixed in together, because the brands all sort of speak to a level of fun or they speak to a level of ABV. That might be way, way out in front, and it's probably not where some of the major, grocery chains and C-store chains are yet. But shelving Girl Beer next to Buzz Balls, next
Yeah.
to Beatbox, next to Garage Beer, you look at all that together
Yeah.
and you go, those all kind of rhyme as far as the narrative goes. But as with everything, there will be a bunch of participants who enter narrative 2.0 in a really clunky way.
Hmm. Yep.
And increasingly the, younger millennial and Gen Z, and then future generations, they'll be able to sniff it out and see right
Yeah.
through it, right. And that's the issue, is that there's often a try hard element to that with narrative.
Hmm.
And a lot of consumers kind of go like, I know it when I see it. So you'll see an influx of that, just like you saw an influx of IPA and just like you saw an influx of hemp brands in the last 12 to 18 months.
Hmm. Hmm. And we'll get on the hemp train in a second because we know that you have
Right.
a client in that space, and we've been following the changes that are being made in real time right now. But before we jump into that side of things, I'm curious. So obviously, a ton of expertise in the Molson Coors distributor network system. Do you guys work outside of the Molson Coors distributor network system as well?
We do. I mentioned earlier that we don't take any money from wholesalers. The work that
Hmm.
we do with them on brand explorations is all free of charge, and that was with purpose, because we want clients to feel like they're getting the best view of the potential route to market options for them in each market. Unquestionably, our depth, our familiarity is with the Molson Coors system. Molson Coors wholesalers, as you know, as a whole, are more consolidated than the AB system nationally. So there's actually fewer call points to deliver those brand exploration sessions. And you have more centralized sort of new brand innovation people looking out for multiple locations around the country. And then in some cases, there's complementary brands in their portfolio because of the historical nature of them bringing on more brands.
Hmm.
But we have, strong and in some cases building and burgeoning relationships on the AB side, as well as with craft wholesalers. Because I think people are saying, give me ideas and give me a filter.
Yeah.
And our clients are saying, I want to know what all my options look like in this market. The one thing that Doug and I have just sort of decided, as far as in the spirit of staying in your lane, is we really have sort of decided that we're not expert in the wine and spirits wholesaler world.
Mhm.
And so, in some ways, that simplifies what we do. So, we're total beverage. So, we do everything from non-alc beer to hemp-derived THC beverage to full strength, full bottle spirits. But in that spirits world, we're able to really narrow our focus and kind of our aperture by saying, would a beer wholesaler embrace this? Would a
Mhm.
beer wholesaler's sales force be really good at selling this? And once you ask those questions, the $80 bottle of tequila usually kind of falls by the wayside. But there are certain brands that really hit because they hit the right price point, they hit the right velocity expectations. They're kind of more of the fast nickel over the slow dime front, which means they're typically lower margin per bottle, but that adds up and makes a beer wholesaler feel like it's turning and moving like the things that make them feel good about success in the market. And then brands that benefit from beer wholesalers' superior service levels, generally speaking. So think about brands that a bar orders in spirits that are like a par order of 5 cases every couple of weeks. And what they want is somebody in that account all the time.
Yeah.
Not every brand benefits from that level of service. You don't need to replenish a $150 bottle of bourbon in an account with a ton of regularity. But what you do need to do is make sure that certain types of brands move with pace. And the beer wholesaler is already in there cleaning draft lines, checking in, running events, comes with a different book of business as well that complements on the beer side. And you generally get more share of mind out of a beer wholesaler if you're a spirits brand right now. You do need to make sure that the beer wholesaler has capability to sell and to speak confidently about it. But as long as you're avoiding, lengthy soliloquies about the provenance and the slope of the hill of the grapes and things like that, all of which is just totally out of my element.
All right.
You can get an audience with beer distributors. We were just on with a client this morning in spirits, in a large beer wholesaler ownership group, and they just got it right away.
Mhm.
And I think that's another important part about engaging with a distributor is it's not just about landing your story with the president or the operator of the wholesaler, because what they're immediately thinking about is when the inevitable game of telephone happens on your brand story, how much is it going to get diluted and how much is it going to stay faithful? And how easy is or hard is it going to be for a distributor sales rep who has 20
Mhm.
MBOs and incentives in their mind and a book that's even bigger than that to say something better than I have a new RTD for you. It's really cool, which
Yeah.
can't fault them for if you don't set them up for success with your narrative. And so more often than not, it's not enough to get a head nod from the person who owns the distributorship or who runs the wholesaler. In their mind, they're thinking, will my folks also be able to sell this as well?
Right, right. That's yeah, interesting. And to the point of distributors or beer distributors not necessarily wanting to or be positioned to sell full strength spirits. Some of them have brought that on, right? And
Yeah.
even companies like Molson Coors, Blue Run and that sort of thing. Um, A, any thoughts about that? And B, since we are talking about Molson Coors, I'm curious, alma mater of yours, curious how you feel about the future of Molson Coors, considering that, Rahul is now CEO. You probably know him decently well. Thoughts on all of the above?
Yeah, I got to catch up with Rahul a bit in Las Vegas at NBWA, which was terrific, and he was doing exactly what a new beer CEO should do, which was shaking hands with distributors and listening to wholesalers and listening to what they need. I mean, y'all have documented it with a few exceptions. It's been an extraordinarily tough year for
Mm,
everybody, and Molson Coors included. It's been a challenging year. I've worked a lot over the years with Gavin and with Rahul. And there's a commonality in the sense that they are people of high integrity who always do things the right way. As you know, I mean, Gavin had a number of challenges thrown at him over the course of his tenure, systemic and otherwise. And he was always a steady hand throughout. And now Rahul has an opportunity in a different type of environment, to kind of carve out his own piece and chart his own path. And I'll be rooting really hard for him, and for the business as well. I just really, really think highly of the guy.
yeah, awesome. But any thoughts on full strength spirits and beer suppliers and beer? Is there a future for that, or do you think that's sort of misplaced interest a little bit?
I don't think it's necessarily misplaced. I think that what you do want to place is the intersection of the product with the things that you and your network are naturally really good at, right? And if that's a build over time, that's fine too. But there are some things in the current moment that your network's going to be especially good at, or that your sales force is going to be especially good at. I think strategically, it's the right direction to go for larger suppliers. And to be totally clear, there's large beer wholesalers who have really leaned in hard with staffing the market and selling that $80 bottle of tequila that I mentioned. I mean, what Ray's is doing in California in particular, as far as not doing anything by half measures, is pretty remarkable in staffing the marketplace. But right now, the best way to succeed, I think, in this moment is that thing that demonstrates quick turn, easier sell-in, and benefits from the high service levels that beer wholesalers provide.
I wanted to ask before we talk about hemp. It has been an extraordinarily tough year, and the industry has a lot of regionality to it. But given how tough things are, and everyone trying to pounce on, any opportunity, have there been wild swings in going from distributor to distributor in need states? Are you kind of hearing the same thing in all those convos?
Um, you would think that during the most challenging times, it would be easier to get a distributor to say yes to a new brand because they'd be more willing to take a flyer on some things that might help them make their annual plan in 2025, but also set themselves up for the future. And unfortunately, we've found the opposite to be true. It's very, very difficult to get to a yes with a distributor right now. And there's just an element of, call it circle the wagons, or dance with who brung you, or what. It's an idea of, this year's been really, really hard. We kind of need to assess what we have right now. We probably unfortunately need to say goodbye to some supplier brands and just let them go. Don't even make them pay to leave. And like a beverage business would do, like a multinational company would do, tighten the belt a little bit and just kind of assess who you want to win with moving forward. And so that's not to say that distributors aren't taking on new brands, but to be the first state for a new brand, for an unproven brand, you better nail that white space narrative, and you better show up with a really realistic view of what that distributor needs from you. I haven't, Jordan, seen a lot of regional variability there. I think that, the local and smaller wholesalers will often be more willing to take a flyer on something, broadly speaking. But the amount of diligence now that goes in to new brand consideration is significant. And that's frustrating for clients, and that's frustrating for people who come to us as potential clients saying, boy, it's really hard to navigate out there. It's just I have all these chain placements even, which used to be enough. It used to be enough to go and say, I've got yeses from these three grocers, and I've got some liquor chains that want to bring on my brand, and unfortunately, it's not necessarily enough right now. That'll
Yeah.
change. It always does.
Yeah.
It ebbs and it flows, and then we'll get back into FOMO and gold rush vibes again at some point soon. But we're not living in that right now, unfortunately.
Well, moving on to hemp and THC, and you have a very well-known brand in Dadgrass, and we've covered them before. How is that going to distributors? You know, pitching a whole new side of the industry to distributors. Was it easier than you thought, or a little more difficult to explain? Did having a brand like that, help things at all?
Yeah, I think there's layers to the hemp question, and obviously there's been a new layer just dropped on
Right.
top. I'm not sure when this will air, but just a couple of days ago with the continuing resolution and the government shutdown and hemp sort of getting wrapped up into that, and it looking like we've got a year to see what the future looks like there. But even rewinding back to first approaching distributors as BrightBev and with our clients, the first layer was around simple risk questions of, can I carry it? And I think most wholesalers, not all, but most got comfortable with that. But then the next became a very familiar layer, which was Distributors looking at brands that, again, solve the problem within their growing portfolio. So they might look and say, I'm not so sure I need another seltzer brand that has THC in it. But also seeing which brands were starting to develop real brand worlds and an emotional element to the brand to complement the functional side. Right now, even today, when you go down and look at the hemp shelf, there are a lot of brands screaming primarily in a functional way. Milligrams of THC, milligrams of other things, this will get you high. And in many ways, it reminds you of the growing days of craft. 7% ABV, 60 IBUs, citrus hops, centennial hops. This is hoppy and this is an IPA. Um, the brands there that ended up standing out were the ones that built an emotional resonance that said, I want to be seen holding this in my hand because it says something about me, beverage being such an intensely personal thing. It's going to take a while for hemp to get there, and hopefully we get the time and the opportunity to get there. A brand like Dadgrass checked those boxes. You just send their website to a distributor who looks at new brands and they just go, yeah, I get it. I understand. Like, I understand exactly what you're carving out. This is the type of thing that I'm accustomed to seeing of really well thought out alcohol beverage brands in terms of the brand world development. The challenge right now in hemp over the last 12 to 18 months has been stuff has sold just based on natural organic demand. And so there hasn't been as much pressure to build out that romantic brand world. And so I think over the next 12 months, brands are going to have to do a lot of soul searching and saying, did I sell based on an upswing in consumer interest, or did I sell because I've got a real brand on my hands here?
And being that you are a lawyer, you're probably better positioned than most. So, to your point, I mean, things are changing this. The House hasn't voted on this omnibus today at this point, but they probably will have by the time this airs. And there's a real possibility that that hemp loophole will get closed. But to your point, you have a year moratorium. Do you think, so you have a year, but do you think some retailers, some wholesalers might not be comfortable carrying those brands in that interim year? Or do you think everything will probably likely stay in market? Some states could say, okay, now that this loophole is closed, even though we have a year, right? What is that landscape going to look like, do you think?
I'm sure there will be some reticence to certainly to get in among those who aren't in. And then of those who went in with some real caution, they might be quicker to pull back. But having talked to several distributors
Hmm.
over the last handful of days, I'm not really hearing a loud sounding of panic or alarm. And I think some of that might just have to do with the fact that wholesalers are so accustomed to this legislative and regulatory dance. And so, in some ways, they are demonstrating more patience than some other actors are. That's
Hmm.
not to say that anybody should be complacent nor despondent right now, because there is some serious work to do. In particular, I think what you're going to see in the marketplace is a lot more direct consumer communication about the products
Hmm.
potentially going away. The benefit that hemp has right now is that it's out there and it's on the shelf. It's not a theoretical thing. But if you think about the universe of Americans who buy beverages, and then you think about the significantly smaller universe who know that hemp beverages exist, and it is not as big as anybody could ever imagine. It is not huge.
Hmm.
I know that they exist and they're legal. And then an even smaller universe, a micro universe within there that is folks who know what just happened this week. It's actually a bedevilingly small number of people who know what happened. And so I think a big task for everybody who has really embraced this space is going to be saying to consumers, these things you've been enjoying are potentially going to go away.
Hmm.
And you're probably going to see that at point of sale and on shelf and stickers and packages and things like that. So that's a little bit of a shift from, so explain to me how this is legal, which is what a lot of the FAQs were early. And now it's going to be a lot more around this could go away without sensible regulation. But you can't call this business as usual because
Sure.
it's far from it. But I'm not seeing the level of panic that you might expect. A year is a long time. I mean, think about where this business was a year ago, even.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Jeez.
mean, think about how much more you cover this business in this
Oh, yeah.
category than you did even a year ago. So I'm cautiously optimistic that there's a series of groups some of whom have a lot of experience with lobbying and influencing, and some of whom are just sort of discovering how to do those things that they can point out to the almighty consumer, who ultimately is going to be the one who hopefully influences the outcomes here. Um,
Right. Yeah. That's what I saw. Somebody had a Substack. I think he's got some sort of fund, and he said, "You're going to have a bunch of angry Karens voting at the midterms." I was like, well, a little bit pejorative way to talk about people that you're supporting, but maybe,
yeah, don't know
what
if
do you
I'd go there, but you, I think everybody expected this moment to come in some form, but not wrapped up the way it was with
Yeah,
all of the other elements and really high stakes stuff
right.
um, wrapped up in a government shutdown and everything that means.
Yeah.
And so to not get the level of attention and prioritization that this topic deserves, and rightfully so, because a lot of those other topics are
Oh,
of
yeah.
vital importance to, to Americans and families. But hopefully that time comes now in the course of the next year while the government hopefully is back up and running.
Yeah, I think it'll find a way. I mean, here in Texas, we went to bed one night certain that it was gone the next day, and then we woke up and Abbott vetoed out of nowhere. So this industry is scrappy, and I think they'll find a way. But having said that, with your experience in with a large supplier and working with distributors, and now working with these entrepreneurs in this hemp industry space, do you think they can find common ground in creating sensible regulations and putting out a framework that can stand, and we can kind of put this to bed and not have to worry about will it live, will it not anymore?
I think the thing I left out, and apologies in answering your first question, Jordan, that's pertinent here was, around why distributors embraced these products. Surely the challenges from the balance of their portfolio had a role, but I would argue that probably even more significant and influential in their thinking was they can very clearly see the occasions that consumers will use these products in. And they are, in some cases, replacements for other things they sell, but in a lot of cases, they're complements. And being able to identify the occasions that all of these beverages can occupy. If you're just functional in your messaging of your branding and everything, you don't show people the where and the when and the how to drink these things, you lose the overall message there. And so I do think that anybody who has experience looking at something that's appropriate for a Tuesday night as a red wine replacement for somebody, something that is a product that you might enjoy during that 3 or 4 hour football game. Those are two distinct different occasions, but everybody wants to grab those. I mean, whether you're a beverage supplier or a distributor or a retailer, everybody wants to embrace those. So my answer would be, yeah, I do think so. Specifically because in a lot of ways, it's like reinventing the variety and diversity of the alcohol beverage segment. I mean, if you think about it, right? There's stuff that's like spirits, there's stuff that's like beers, there's stuff that's like seltzers, there's stuff that's like cocktails. Those are all things that people associate with moments in time and the people around them and that sort of thing.
I won't say who, but I can think of large suppliers who I think would embrace this were it legal, and I can think of some very large suppliers who wouldn't. So we will certainly have a fight on our hands of some sort.
I think we'll learn a lot more about where people stand on things in the next 12
Yeah.
months. That much is for certain. That's probably an uncontroversial hot take.
Right. Yeah. We will see. Let's see. Well, just briefly, because I mean, we've almost had you for an hour because you've been so thrilling. Where do you find your brands that you work with?
We don't do a ton of marketing.
Mhm.
I, my partner Doug Valicki, who started his career in beer, actually setting up the internal audit function at Ray's Holdings, and then became the chief financial officer at Revolution Brewing here in Illinois, which is the largest independent craft brewery, and then made the very atypical leap from CFO to chief marketing officer. He, over the last 10 years or so, has built up a pretty significant following in TikTok and Instagram, as well as a Substack that he publishes on the beverage business. And so, that's an opportunity for us sometimes to put ideas and trends out into the marketplace and to have consumers and industry observers say, I agree. And guess what? I'm a founder and I'm actually building this brand. And that's where I think some of the virtuous cycle happens again. It's been, more than one instance where we started with a distributor and said, we like this trend. Here's some brands. Sort of started to talk about that brand, and then it came full circle all the way around. As for me, like I was like a kicking and screaming LinkedIn person, but I got persuaded that when you are the product, it's a place that you should be. So we do get a lot of outreach there as well. But typically, a distributor will come to us and say, somebody approached us and we're interested, and the answer is not yes yet, but they really should talk to you over the next couple of months to refine this story and come back to us. So we hear from them. We hear from investment funds and from individual investors a lot of the time who say, these folks have something really good cooking, but they're either naive about DSD, they're openly hostile to DSD, and they need to understand that they need to change that posture towards DSD. Or sometimes people will reach out to us and say, I'm calling you not because I don't know how to do this stuff, but specifically because I know how to do this. I know how hard it is, and I have 1,000 other things that I want to look after in my business. And so we'd like to partner with you, in that regard. So they come from a variety of sources. I think with our thesis being pretty simple, which is DSD and route to market are often the overlooked part of a beverage brand's success and solve a problem for a distributor. You put those things together, and I think people sort of get it at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. And are you looking at adding new services in the future? I know you said, you have this very narrow focus, right? But
Yeah.
that said, you're working with all these, investment, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, what we've found is that our foot in the door is usually route to market and DSD because it's a widespread need and there's not a lot of help out there focused on it. And that's still the majority of the work that we do. But when you combine our two CVs and our experience together, there's a bunch of things that we can help on. I mean, we talk to distributors and to clients about everything from components of a variety pack to how to set a price pack curve to how to engage on social. And so we're careful not to be the Wheelo Services consulting firm
Right.
because we want to have that focus. But what we find over time is that what we think is that clients essentially get the experience and the insight that you might get from an advisory board that you put together of people that you provide some equity in your business to, and you talk to a couple hours a month. And it's great that you get to talk to them a couple hours a month, but after those couple of hours, that's all the time they have to devote to you because they're busy and that's not their principal business. And then you have a lot of work to do as the founder afterwards. It's great work to do, but you have to do it. We like to think that we provide that same breadth, but with significantly more hours, and that we take a lot of the homework on ourselves at the end of that conversation. So when we say you need to take this investor deck and turn it into something that's more relevant for a distributor, and those are
Right.
two very different messages, we'll help with that. So we'll say to somebody, I know that an investor wants to know all about your unit economics. Do you know what a distributor wants to know about? Their economics. So,
Yeah.
focus more so on their margins and focus on how you're going to split price promotions and things like that versus how much you can save by going to printed cans. It's great that you can, and a distributor will be really happy for you that you're able to do that, but not at the expense of their margin
Right.
overall. So I think that the short answer is, our aspiration is to be long-term with our clients. We don't have a ton of clients, and that's by design. And over time, it kind of blossoms, right? I mean, think about the people that you consider your best friends in the world. The day that you met them, you didn't go, it's awesome. I can't wait to talk to you about having kids and personal challenges and to spend vacations together. No, no, you're
In
just like,
20 years.
I'm just kind of getting to know you, right? You're putting somebody out. They're not going to be your best friend anymore if that happens. So, I think over time we try to build that trust and have a long view. We do invest funds back into clients where it appears that the relationship is going long term, and we have the ability to raise money on behalf of clients from kind of a larger investor base as well. So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Working with founders is terrific, very rewarding. People throw around the word humbling or humbled too much, especially on LinkedIn. But it's humbling to see just how challenging this is, right? Especially after you come from a world where you have a lot more resources. But it's a heck of a lot of fun.
I really like the Wheel O services. You guys should have that as your
Yeah, it'll
as
be
your
like the flavor wheel for
yeah.
beer. You spin it around and service comes up. Yeah, we're gonna try to avoid that,
That's
especially right
good.
now.
That's good. Awesome. Well, I think that's everything I had to ask Jeff. Unless Jordan, you have anything else?
I think just the outro,
All
that
right.
the outro options you had for us.
Oh yeah, so my Irish-born mother would love for me to recommend "Dreams" by the Cranberries.
Okay.
Oh yes, yes.
And you could also go with "Dreams" by Van Halen, although that's technically Van Hagar.
Van
Um,
Hagar. Yeah.
uh, Unpopular opinion: the Van Hagar stuff in some ways is just as good as the David Lee Roth stuff.
Uh-oh.
Hopefully that sets you up for the intro, and you don't have to pay any royalties on the music that you play.
We're gonna
Yeah.
have Harry doing what's her name? Dolores O'Riordan and her little yodel. We're gonna superimpose that over the end here. So
I think if we all sing it, we can probably get around the royalties because I don't think any of us are real singers. Then they won't
Well,
pick
I'm
up
not
on it.
a,
Yeah.
I'm not a real lawyer on that topic. I can tell you that. So I'm not going to opine on any of that. So cue "Dream Lover" by Mariah Carey now.
there you go. All right, awesome. Well, that was a ton of fun, Jeff, and we'll have you on again in 6 months. So thank you.
That'd be great.
Thanks.
Bye. Take care.
Cheers.
ya.
Bye.